Good to go.
Hi there, welcome everybody. Welcome to our Friday Tech Talk. This is our first one of the year, so thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Forrest. I'm here with the job placement team, joined by Rick and Star as well for the Tech Academy. Today we are joined by Jason Hill. He is a longtime commercial banker, and he's going to be discussing with us his personal conversation with Bitcoin. He's also a Tech Academy graduate, so a lot of you have that in common. He's going to talk about the history of Bitcoin and walk us through what a typical Bitcoin transaction looks like. At the end, we'll open it up for any sort of questions relating to his talk or anything you're curious about. So if you have questions, hold them off to the end, or we have a chat box that you are more than welcome to throw those questions up in. But without any further ado, Jason, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks a lot for joining. Anyone that spent much time in Bitcoin space knows that, it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I wanted to start with these definitions to just give you a taste of that. First off is Andreas Antonopoulos, and he says Bitcoin is a 21st century system of internet money that is open, borderless, neutral, censorship resistant, immutable, and permissionless. It serves the needs of commerce for every person on the planet, no matter where they are, no matter who they are, anytime, anywhere. That's a bit of a run-on sentence, but covers all the bases. Andreas Antonopoulos is first and foremost an educator. The guy's amazing at making the complex comprehensible. Anytime I'm trying to fill any of the many gaps that I have in my understanding of Bitcoin, he's the first guy I go to. The next guy is Ansel Linder, and he says Bitcoin is a goal to separate money and state, specifically to separate the power to issue money and censor transactions by a central authority. Ansel Linder, like so many people in the Bitcoin space, really interesting guy, family guy. I think he used to be a Marine. He's actually a self-proclaimed anarchist, but not like the let's just break stuff and burn it up type. He's more the individual rights type. Really smart guy, has a great podcast called Bitcoin and Markets, and he's really good also at sussing out a lot of the many scams in the crypto space. Next is Warren Buffett's famous quote. This one made a lot of headlines. Bitcoin is rat poison squared. If you don't know, Warren Buffett's a bajillionaire investor, founder of Berkshire Hathaway Fund, also known as the Oracle of Omaha. He doesn't get much wrong at all, but I think so far at least he's whiffed on this one, at least from a purely investment standpoint. And then the last one is probably my favorite quotes of Bitcoin, about Bitcoin of all time. And Bitcoin is a tool for freeing humanity from tyrants and oligarchs dressed up as a get-rich-quick scheme. And that's from Naval Ravikant. He's the founder of AngelList. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll have a little better understanding of why I like that one so much. But at the end of the day, the old adage, where you sit is where you stand, comes into play a lot when it comes to Bitcoin. Everyone has their biases, and given its disruptive potential, it's hard not to have some strong opinions. To me, the most interesting part about studying it is getting to understand the problems that it was created to solve. And, I think that ties into my personal bias, which I should probably state. I really like Bitcoin a lot. And yes, I own a little bit, but, not enough to kidnap me over. You won't be able to get it anyway. I'm sure you all are nice people, but, I think my interest in Bitcoin, again, is mostly just because I think it has a great opportunity to make society better. I mean, yeah, a lot of people have gotten rich, and you hear a lot of talk about the Lamborghinis or whatever that people are buying, but that's hopefully not the reason people want to get into it. It's got a lot of bad press, but I think we all need to keep an open mind. And even if you decide that you hate Bitcoin, that's fine. But remember, the existing monetary system isn't serving us so hot either. So no matter what, it has something to teach us. My personal interest, I think, grew while I was working as an underwriter in commercial banking. I spent about 15 years in commercial banking. First heard about it in 2013, and at that time I was about halfway through my second credit cycle, and it was becoming, increasingly difficult to ignore that, these booms and busts, were, said in coder speak, I'll say more feature than bug. They just seemed a little too predictable. The moral hazard created by these bailouts is real. I mean, and it's also very profitable for the financial sector. And I think it's naive for all of us to believe that banks are going to change independently. Even the regulators are increasingly powerless, it seems. So, maybe what they need is some competition, and Bitcoin definitely fits that bill. So, even if it doesn't win, I already think it's putting a lot of pressure on that industry to rethink business as usual. But long story short, I came to the conclusion that the problems in banking are systemic, and no one, least of which me, is going to be able to do much about it. And, I tried to speak up on good days, I suppose, about the most egregious crap, but mostly, the disillusionment just made me increasingly bored and demotivated. Predictably, my career, I guess plateaued would be the nice way to say it. But, the experience also introduced me to Bitcoin. So, it's at the end of the day, it's fair is fair. So are we still looking at the PowerPoint screen? How do I?
Yeah, if you want to take it down, there is a stop presenting button on your screen.
Yeah, I remember you had told me that, but now it's not there anymore.
It might be on the bottom right.
Bottom right. What if I just close the whole thing?
Here, if I
I'm hitting close and see if that works.
Boom, there we go.
Does that work?
Perfect.
All right, cool. So yes, I mean, sometimes Bitcoin fans like me get a bad rap for being a little pessimistic, maybe, or stubborn or closed-minded, particularly when it comes to the merits of altcoins or the latest applications of blockchain. And I mean, I guess there's some truth to it, but in our defense, I want to say, at least since I've been in Bitcoin, we've seen some really weird stuff. Like, for example, one of the first Bitcoin billionaires, a guy named Roger Ver, also referred to as Bitcoin Jesus, basically tried to hijack the whole thing. And then some guy from Australia, a self-described a-hole from named Craig Wright, made a big media splash by trying to claim that he himself was Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin. And that might have been a cool thing if there wasn't a mountain of evidence showing that he was not. And for one, I have no idea who Satoshi Nakamoto is, but I'm sure he or she is not an a-hole. And perhaps more convincingly, Craig Wright never was able to come up with the keys for any of the Bitcoin addresses that were known to belong to Satoshi. So, and that would have been a really simple and decisive way to confirm his claim. I think he's still out there, and some people still believe him, but hopefully his 15 minutes are just about over. All of this is kind of a long way of saying if some Bitcoiners seem jaded or garbage, please don't take it personally. We have some good reasons to be suspicious. I mean, at the end of the day, Bitcoin really is the biggest hacker bounty in the world. It's probably the biggest one, and it's under constant attack. Even from state level actors, and it's been that way for at least 10 years. So it definitely lacks some of the bells and whistles of other altcoins, but this simplicity in a lot of ways is what's makes it so strong. I'll move on now just to some history. I think some people get the false impression that the technology underpinning Bitcoin is all thanks to its notoriously absent founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. But the truth is Bitcoin is actually the successful combination of technologies that date back several decades. In particular, it's a function of multiple failed attempts to create a decentralized electric currency. Collectively, the early pioneers were often referred to as, or still referred to as, the cypherpunks or extropians, if you want to do some more research on them. And I'm sure in reality they all had lots of different motivations and beliefs, but I think it's fair to say they all tended to distrust centralized authority, particularly when it came to the intersection of money and surveillance. The first of these guys I'll discuss, and women I'll discuss, is David Chaum. He, in 1982, he's the one who came up with what we now refer to as blockchain. And he had in his dissertation, computer systems established, maintained, and trusted by mutually suspicious groups. And we had a pretty good tech talk a few weeks ago, so I won't get into it too much, but it's essentially a digital distributed ledger of transactions that's duplicated, distributed across the entire network of computer systems in a way that makes it difficult to change or cheat the system. In the business news, you'll often hear some form of the following mantra, Bitcoin's great, but what's really revolutionary is blockchain. And there's some truth to that, but I just want to add maybe a couple things to that. First of all, it wasn't Bitcoin or Satoshi that invented blockchain. It was this guy. And also it's worth noting that he did it roughly 40 years ago. So it does bear the question, why did it take 40 years for big business to figure it out? That's particularly true for the blockchains that are not using proof of work, which I'll explain later. But I do understand there are lots of blockchain applications for which proof of work is overkill and wasteful. And also blockchain, at least here in Portland, is definitely where the job growth is. I don't see a lot of jobs for Bitcoin startups. Coinbase, I guess, being the obvious exception. But regardless of how we currently define it, blockchain was really the beginning of solving one of the key problems for digital currencies, and that problem is the double spend problem. Which is basically that with a little work, anything digital can be copied, right? So unless you have a third-party intermediary that's with the ability to censor rogue transactions, it's relatively easy for someone to make copies and say go buy a coffee with one of the digital coins and then go across the street and buy the same thing with the exact same coin. Of course, you can't do that with cash. Cash is the ultimate solution to the double spend problem, because once it's out of your wallet, there's really no hack that's going to make it reappear there. And David Chaum went a long way to solving this double spend problem, but there were some related vulnerabilities that remained. So before we were able to actually arrive at Bitcoin, some of them had to be solved. Most notably, something called the Byzantine generals problem. And it's briefly, it's sort of, how do you stop a determined attacker from simply just changing their copy of the information and then passing it on to the rest of the network as the most legitimate copy? And the only foolproof solution that David Chaum was able to find was, to set up yet another corruptible centralized authority that was going to have the power to resolve these types of disputes. And that's at least until the invention of proof of work, which we have Cynthia Dwork and Noni Naor to thank for it. These two women originally did it in an attempt to slow spam mail, and that was back in 1993. And they didn't refer to it as proof of work by name, but they're the first ones that came up with it. So, since then, myriad of people have helped with it, including Hal Finney, Adam Back, to create what we now call proof of work. But it was initially invented by these two women, so they deserve the credit. And today, it's proof of work is better known as the most robust form of protection for open, decentralized blockchains. In the case of Bitcoin, proof of work helps stop the Byzantine generals' problem by forcing nodes, more specifically the miners, to incur real-world energy costs in order to make changes to the blockchain. This protects the blockchain because any attack is likely to cost as much as the amount you can steal. So, and the cost benefit for the attacker goes completely out the window when you realize that their chances of success are very low, and most likely all that they're going to get out of it is a very large electricity bill. Adam Back is the first that was able to combine blockchain and proof of work successfully for use in a digital currency, and it worked pretty well. But the problem it ran into wasn't a lack of security. It was that, how do you introduce a new currency into the system without the help of a centralized authority? I mean, if you want to sell them for fiat currencies, then you have to involve the banks, and that's going to assume that they're going to be willing participants in facilitating a technology that could potentially cannibalize their business, and so that didn't happen, and eventually Adam Back abandoned the project. But it's at this time that a guy, Wei Dai, is credited for saving the day. So Wei Dai came up with the idea to use the same proof of work technology to mine for new coins. And I'll talk more about the mining process in a moment here. But at that point, we basically had all the pieces we needed in the puzzle for Bitcoin, but we were just waiting on Satoshi Nakamoto to come along and put them all together. And that started in October of 2008 is when Satoshi Nakamoto published his famous white paper, Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System. It's only 9 pages and surprisingly readable. I recommend everyone go check it out. It was a few months later, in January of 2009, that the first Genesis block was mined. The Genesis block, aka block 0, is the first block in the Bitcoin blockchain. Other than its obvious symbolic relevance, it's embedded with a text that's from the Times, which says, January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. And I think that really speaks to his motivations at the time. And, given my own experience in banking, this gave me even more confidence that I was jumping down the right rabbit hole. In January of that same year, the now late Hal Finney received 10 free Bitcoins, and this is considered the first Bitcoin transaction in history. And then in October of 2009, 1,000 Bitcoins were sold for $1. That gave it its first valuation, which was 1 BTC equals 1/10 of a cent. So if this is when you got in, it's safe to say you probably made one of the best investments in human history. Probably want to save up for the capital gains taxes, though. And then there's May 22nd, 2010, Laszlo Hayek bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins. And this day is still known as Pizza Day among Bitcoin fans. And I'm guessing Laszlo probably isn't a huge fan, but you got to imagine it wasn't his last 10,000 Bitcoin. So he's probably doing just fine. In June of 2011, that's when WikiLeaks began to accept Bitcoin for donations. And after credit card companies and PayPal denied them the ability to accept donations over the internet, they were able to continue funding themselves. And I think they actually got a lot more money than they were receiving before by using Bitcoin. And this ended up ultimately being publicity for Bitcoin because it showed one of its major use cases, which is censorship resistance. And censorship resistance basically just means a centralized authority is not able to deny you access to your money simply because they say so. A little later, in October 2013, the FBI seized roughly 26,000 Bitcoin from the black market website known as Silk Road, which was run by, what's his name? His nickname was Dread Pirate Roberts. His real name escapes me at the moment, but for a long time thereafter, the FBI was one of the biggest known holders of Bitcoin. I believe they've auctioned most of it off at this point. Moving on to February 2014, one of the first, and at the time the largest Bitcoin exchanges, Mt. Gox, suspended withdrawals, citing technical issues. And by the end of the month, they'd filed for bankruptcy protection, and ultimately roughly 744,000 Bitcoins had been stolen. I think some have been recovered, but a small fraction of it. And people losing Bitcoin on these exchanges is a story that you'll hear a lot. And I think a lot of people new to Bitcoin erroneously assume that it's due to a vulnerability in the Bitcoin protocol itself, but it's not. It's always due to breaches in the exchange's own security. Really, always. That's what it is. And a lot of times it's the actual founders that ended up taking the money, which may be the case with Mt. Gox. I think it's still in court. Anthony Karpelis was the owner's name at the time it was taken over. I don't think he actually founded it. This points to one of the most important lessons someone new to Bitcoin can learn. And the lesson is, you'll hear it all the time, not your keys, not your Bitcoin. Never give access to your private keys to anyone. Don't even type it in a keyboard if you can help it. If you have to for trading purposes, make sure you keep the balances small and remove them as soon as you can. The best way to protect your Bitcoin is to keep them offline entirely. That means not even on your personal computer. There's a couple companies, there's actually quite a few, maybe a half dozen companies, including Ledger and Trezor. Those are probably the 2 most popular ones that have come up with really good solutions for how to do this. And basically what it looks like is a fancy little jump drive that costs maybe $40 to $100, and they're called cold wallets. And the most powerful aspect of these is they're not connected to the internet at all. And even when you need to type in your private key or seed, you don't have to do it directly into the keyboard. It works as a there's a little screen there where you can do it separate from the keyboard. March of 2016, Cabinet of Japan recognized virtual currencies like Bitcoin as having a function similar to real money. And I think it's safe to say that Japan is still probably one of the safest, well, friendliest countries in the world for Bitcoin, at least among the big economies. August 2017 is when things got a little ugly after a 2-year social media war. This is when Bitcoin split into 2 separate digital currencies via a hard fork. The Bitcoin chain, BTC chain, maintained its 1 megabyte block size limit, and the Bitcoin Cash chain with 8 megabyte blockchain size limit, or block size limit, was the other one. This was a true hard fork, and it was led by the aforementioned Roger Ver, aka the Bitcoin Jesus I spoke of earlier. The stated intentions were to increase the block size, to reduce fees and speed up transaction times. And people that opposed Bitcoin Cash at the time primarily just felt that the proposed changes to the code might open up unanticipated vulnerabilities. And they were really later proven right when Bitcoin Cash was itself forced a hard fork, not just once, but on several occasions. And maybe Roger Ver had good intentions, but it's a really good thing that the Bitcoin community decided not to follow him. Instead, Bitcoin adopted a less disruptive soft fork, meaning that it was backwards compatible to the existing Bitcoin software. And it was something called segregated witness, which didn't increase the block size, but it reduces the amount of text needed in the block through some additional hashing, which effectively increased the block size to roughly 4 megabytes. Bitcoin Cash still exists. I think it's top 10 altcoin, but its value is a fraction of Bitcoin's. I think it's right around $400. And as of today, I haven't looked, but it sounds like Bitcoin's getting pretty close to $40,000 each. So at this point, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. And I'm going to go through some of these same technologies I just discussed, but do it in the context of a basic Bitcoin transaction. So in this scenario, let's assume Alice wants to buy a car from Bob, and I'll break the transaction into 3 parts. There's the signing, the broadcasting, and confirmation. I'll try to do my best to go through it sequentially, but if someone notices me getting backwards on something, just let me know during the Q&A. So starting with signing, Alice wants to buy a used car worth 1 BTC from Bob. Before she goes to Bob's house, she transferred 1 BTC from her cold storage wallet that, remember, is in no way connected to the internet, to her phone. And she has a wallet on her phone, and that's a decent place to hold small balances of Bitcoin, probably more secure than a lot of the exchanges. But they can still be hacked. And SIM card swaps are reportedly becoming more common. When she arrives at Bob's, she opens her wallet app, takes a picture of a QR code on Bob's phone that is generated by his wallet. This gives Alice's wallet the address of the blockchain where Bob's wallet is. And so Alice's wallet then prepares a message which is going to include the amount and the recipient's wallet address and a digital signature. The digital signature consists of a one-way cryptographic hash of the text of her private keys. And this hash, in combination with Bob's access to Alice's public key, will prove to Bob's wallet and the Bitcoin network that Alice is in fact the owner of the Bitcoin that is about to be sent. So from here on out, even the most subtle changes to the transaction are going to get detected by the network. I'd like to talk more about the one-way hash functions, but it's still a little bit of a blind spot for me. For those of you who are more technical on this call, I know SHA-256 and elliptic curves, blah, blah, blah. But it just still hasn't quite sunk in hasn't quite sunk in yet. And but until then, I'm comfortable just leaning on the fact that, again, we have a $700 billion bounty out there. If one-way cryptographic hash functions didn't work, we would know already. So now on to broadcasting. At the same time, while Alice's wallet is sending the transactions to Bob's wallet, it's also being sent to the nodes. So Bitcoin nodes work similar to internet nodes in that they're widely distributed around the world and are propagators of the network protocol. But most Bitcoin nodes are just regular people's computers that are willing to donate their time and some energy to maintaining the and about 400 gigabytes of disk space, maybe 300 gigabytes of disk space in order to support the Bitcoin network. So, in fact, like if any of you really want to support Bitcoin, that's probably one of the best ways to do it. It's not that complicated at all. You just go to bitcoin.org and they can walk you through the downloading process. Don't go to bitcoin.com. That's owned by Roger Ver, the Bitcoin Jesus guy, unless you want to buy Bitcoin Cash. I'll skip that as well. All right. So anyway, so after Alice's transaction gets preliminary approval from all the nodes, it's said to be in the mempool. The mempool is basically a pool of valid transactions that are just waiting for the miners to place in a block and ultimately get added to the blockchain. So it's at this point that I'll introduce the miners. This is when they get involved. They begin by selecting the transactions from the mempool for creating their next block. If the mempool is relatively full, fees tend to go up. If it's empty, fees can be negligible. But if the mempool is really full, the miners are going to cherry pick the highest fees, and it may take a little longer to get your transaction approved. So I don't think I mentioned fees. Well, I talked a little bit about fees earlier, but it's part of the incentive for miners to maintain the network. And most new wallets will try to optimize these fees for you automatically, or they can be customized by the sender. But either way, it's still something you want to understand. I mean, the Bitcoin blockchain does not break down existing balances into smaller units. So therefore, these smaller units are something called UTXOs, which are unspent transaction outputs. But so, when you make a payment, there's usually going to be a surplus, which is one of these UTXOs in excess of the amount that you used to pay in the transaction. And that needs to get returned to the sender. So the surplus is called change. And your wallet usually does this seamlessly. But if you're not aware of your wallet settings, it's apparently possible to screw this up so that all the changes get treated like a fee. So it's a really good idea to double check your fee settings when you get a new wallet. And at this point is when the miners' race to solve computational work is underway. Usually within an average of 10 minutes, some miner is going to be able to solve the come up with a proper hash that's part of the computational work function. And as a reward, they get, not just the transaction fees, but they also get, at the moment, 12.5 Bitcoins. So, I mean, it's big business. At this point, I think, unless you have $50 million or so, it's pretty tough to get it into mining. When it first started, most miners were just doing it on their laptops. That's no longer an option. But it's important because this is Bitcoin's solution for how to distribute new coins. Which is what Hashcash. That's the problem that Hashcash ran into earlier. So at this point, Alice and Bob will both be able to see their transaction was confirmed and added to the blockchain. However, since this is like a relatively large transaction, Bob probably doesn't want to hand over the keys just yet. There are situations where a block added to the blockchain will be temporarily reversed and the transaction will need to be reconfirmed, but the chances of this happening approach zero as more and more blocks are added to the blockchain. So, say if you want to buy a cup of coffee, one confirmation is probably more than enough. But if you want to buy something like a car, you might want to wait for 2 or 3 confirmations. The gold standard, for example, if you want to buy a house, I think is 6 confirmations. On average, a block is solved every 10 minutes or so. So in the case of Alice and Bob, they're probably going to have to hang out together for roughly 20 or 30 minutes. But after that transaction is complete, Alice takes the keys and the title, and Bob can be assured that there's really no way that Alice can reverse this transaction. So, that's about all I got right now. And obviously, I'm just scraping the surface here, but there's always going to be something more to learn. Just hope you walk away. Just don't forget that no matter what we think about Bitcoin, it doesn't appear to be going anywhere soon. So education is essential. Once more of us understand it, it'll be a lot easier for us to start thinking creatively about how we can best make it work for us. I believe there are billion-dollar businesses to be built around this technology. I also think there are huge social problems it can solve. So to me, the fact that we have the opportunity to do a little bit of both now is about as cool as it gets. So thanks to everyone for listening. And we have like 15 minutes now.
Yeah, we got about 15 minutes or so. First off, thank you, Jason, for that incredibly educational talk there. We really appreciate it. We're opening it up now to questions. If anybody has a question, feel free to jump right in. I've got some questions myself if nobody else has any at the moment. But does anybody have a question for Jason? All right, I will kick things off. Towards the beginning, you mentioned proof of work. Can you go into a little bit more detail as to what you mean by proof of work when you're talking about Bitcoin and blockchain?
Again, that's part of the. It's similar to the hash functions that you see that I was discussing earlier that are a bit of a blind spot for me. But basically, proof of work is a computational algorithm that all of these computers are racing to solve. And it's not a particularly complex problem. It's basically you're just searching for a needle in a haystack kind of thing. And it's one of the analogies that I heard is it's similar to Sudoku. Like it's going to take a lot of work to solve it, but as soon as you get it right, you're going to know it, because it's very easy to know that you got all your 1s and 9s in a row. In the case for proof of work, there's a certain number of leading zeros that you need to come up with in a hash. And the more leading zeros are in that hash, the higher the difficulty. And so the difficulty of that problem increases based on the average that it's taking transactions to get approved. So I think it's every 2 weeks, the entire network will reset the difficulty for proof of work based on the prior week's efforts. And there it's it's probably one of the biggest knocks against Bitcoin, because it takes a lot of energy, and there are environmental problems with it. But you just have to factor in all the offsetting things that Bitcoin is going to hopefully be able to do, that it is going to be a lot easier on our environment, i.e., a lot less booms and busts. It's probably going to make it more difficult to raise money to fight wars. It'll decentralize the ability to print money at a whim by relatively small secretive group. So I think the offsetting positives of proof of work at this moment are kind of it's the leg I have to stand on when people talk about the environmental effects of Bitcoin.
Gotcha. Do you think that there's ever a chance that cryptocurrencies in general could replace our current financial systems? I mean, far in the future?
I mean, it could. You'd have to get buy-in for a lot of people. I think there's obviously a lot of pushback from a lot of very powerful interests that aren't going to let that happen easily. I think in a lot of ways it's kind of a good thing that it doesn't happen easily or quickly. The more people understand it, and the more widely Bitcoin's distributed when it does become a more significant part of the economy, the better, I think. As far as will it ever, sure, it's possible. I think more likely it's, at least in the medium term, more likely it's going to play a role very similar to gold, sort of as an inflationary hedge and a place to store value.
Gotcha. Looks like Keenan's got a question. Go for it, Keenan.
Hey there. So let's say you're somebody like me. I've got a reasonably powerful computer and a really good fiber internet connection, and no other resources really to bring to the table here. And what if I wanted to get involved with crypto? I understand that there's crypto mining and staking and things like that. I don't really understand what those terms mean, but is there anything meaningful I could do from where I'm at to possibly start gathering some crypto?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can only speak for the Bitcoin network. I don't know a whole lot about the other altcoins, and I know they've made a lot of advances in proof of stake, but I don't think Bitcoin is too big of a target for that at the moment. If an altcoin's worth upwards of $500 billion in market share and can protect itself from hacks with proof of stake, that'll be great. That'll be a great day, but we're not there yet. As far as what you can do, just set up a full node. You don't have to be a miner to be a node. Nodes are the ones that, when Alice and Bob first made the transactions, they're the ones that initially looked at it and made sure that Alice had the money that she said she was going to have, and that they were following the protocol. And that really protects the entire network, similar to the way you protect the internet. There's no centralized point of attack. So the more people that start full nodes, the better. And again, if you want to do that, just go to bitcoin.org. It's really easy to do.
So how much of my local computing and network resources would I have to devote to being a node? What is that? And what do I get out of that? Like, what is the benefit to me?
It's an altruistic move mostly for you, but it also allows you to monitor the blockchain in real time. If you're a full node, you don't have to depend on your wallet to tell you whether or not a transaction has gone through.
Okay.
And as far as, I think the blockchain, I think, is close to about 300 gigabytes right now. So you're definitely going to have to donate some hard disk space. As far as bandwidth, I don't know. I'm not sure, but I run one a lot of the time, and it never messes up my web
Right.
connections.
Fair enough. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Anybody else have a question for Jason? I had one last question if we had time. You mentioned.
There's a couple people.
Oh, is there? Oh, go for it. Sorry, I can't quite. Oh, beautiful. All right, go for it, Jackie.
Jamie.
Jamie, is there a Jamie also? Sorry, I can't see everybody on my
I see a Jamie and a
yeah.
Star Erickson.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, Jamie, my bad. Sorry, I'm mixing people up over here.
Hi.
Go for it.
Jason, can you go back over real quick what you were talking about being secure and what, like, only using it on a certain device? I've never heard that before, and I'm just a little bit confused.
Yeah, well, so if you're completely new to the space, it's going to be a little hard for me to explain, but essentially when you own Bitcoin, you are given a private key, and that private key is usually in the form of a 24-word seed, and it's just a random string of words. And whoever has that seed can take your Bitcoin at any time. Whoever owns that seed owns that Bitcoin. And so to protect it, you need to make sure that that seed is somewhere very, very safe. And a lot of people end up just putting it on their computer, or with a lot of these exchanges, they require that you provide them with that seed, and that just involves a lot of trust. But the products I was talking about are basically little jump drives, and those will hold the seeds to the Bitcoin that you own. And at the moment, it used to need a different seed for every address. I think that's correct. Maybe it was every. Yeah. But now there's technology where you can have one seed that's going to control multiple addresses. So that part's a lot easier. But most important part is you don't want that seed online, just like any other information that you don't want taken. The less it's connected to the internet, the better.
Okay, so I actually bought some Bitcoin a couple of years ago because people were like, you should do this. So I downloaded the
Congratulations.
What?
Congratulations.
Thanks. I downloaded the app, I put in the money, and then I kind of forgot about it. I deleted the app, and it was only till currently, like, everyone was like, oh, blah, 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 like, it's up. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna, like, download the app again. And I honestly have no knowledge on the whole, like, seed thing. Like, maybe at the time I understood it, but I don't remember actually what I was thinking at the time. So I re-downloaded the app and I was able to sign in. Like, I had no issue, but I've never used it anywhere but Coinbase on my phone. But, like, can I possibly lose that?
Well, you might not be able to access it again, just because it's probably still wherever it initially was when you purchased it. No one's probably taken it, but unless you have.
Yeah, I have it, but just like, I didn't realize that there could have been that whole factor of me not even being able to get it. Like, someone could have taken that seed.
Right. Well, what you do want to do is make sure that you get the seed from your wallet. So, in case you just lose your phone, not even getting it stolen, so that you have a way of retrieving the Bitcoin. Because as long as you have that seed, it doesn't matter if you lose your phone or, lose your computer, whatever, you can always get your Bitcoin back with that seed. So I guess I'd recommend you call the wallet's manufacturer or Coinbase and see if they provided it for you. But when you bring up the app, does your wallet still say that there's a balance of Bitcoin on there?
Yeah, like, everything works. I just am kind of unfamiliar with it. It was like, maybe a couple of days ago or like more that I re-downloaded it. And I was like, oh, and I was looking back at the dates and everything. Like, it's all in there, but I didn't realize how risky it was. Like, I guess there's like way more about it that I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the technology in phones is pretty secure, but the risk of losing it is huge.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was a factor at all. So interesting.
But I'm surprised you were just able to re-download the wallet and then it just popped back up on there.
Right? Like, I don't know. Like, so I have a Google phone and I have all my passwords saved in there. So it just like auto loaded my password. So I don't know. I just re-downloaded the app and it signed me in, and it just, like any other app, when you delete it and then you re-download it and you have your login and password, and you know, I just didn't think of it as anything different.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you lucked out, but probably want to call the wallet's manufacturer.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I'm just gonna look more into that. And you were saying you could buy it in other places besides Coinbase?
Buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, like
ATMs. You know, probably the best way is peer-to-peer. If you go to some of these Bitcoin meetups, you know, people will sell you Bitcoin directly. But I think Coinbase is, if you're going to buy a lot, you know, usually that is the place that they're going. But after you buy it from Coinbase, just make sure you're taking it off of there and storing it on a cold wallet.
okay,
There
yeah,
is an
this
attached
is
to the network.
this is a lot.
I mean, the act of buying it itself, I don't think exposes you much, but the leaving it on there for long periods of time does.
Okay.
And you know,
Thank
I don't
you.
think Coinbase has been hacked as of yet. And the Winklevi are quite wealthy. I don't see them running away with it anytime soon. If I was to put some Bitcoin on an exchange, it'd probably be that one, or Kraken's another really good one. But anyways,
Cool. I'm gonna definitely do some more research after this.
good. Thanks.
Star had a question and then she got kicked off the internet, but she's here with me. She wanted to mention that China claims that they have quantum computing now, and they are going to use that to bring down Bitcoin. Do you know anything about that? Do you have any opinions about that?
I mean, they've been talking about that for a long time. I know China just stole like 4.3 billion Bitcoin from a South Korean exchange. So, and the Chinese, they own a lot of it, so they'll be shooting themselves in the foot for one. The other thing is, you know, the quantum computing thing. Maybe it'll do it or not. I have no idea. The case is the real case of the matter, but you know, I think as that technology comes along, there'll be new technology to defend itself. It's sort of an arms race.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The Chinese are pirates, man.
All right, I think that is going to do it for our time here. I wanted to say.
Let me say one more thing about that story. Like,
oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, it was a crazy story. Like I think I said earlier that it's not that surprising when the Chinese, or not the Chinese, when a network or a exchange gets hacked. But in this case, like, this is a South Korean company. The Chinese had taken the founder into custody. He's in custody for like 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden, all the Bitcoin disappears. So, you know, you got to figure maybe during those 2 weeks, what they were doing was figuring out how to get his seed from him.
Sounds kind of suspicious. Yeah.
Jason, I did have one question for you.
Sure.
If you have your seed on your cold wallet and you lose your cold wallet, are you just out of luck?
No, because you will have written it down as well. And actually, so while the seed, I don't want to say the seed's actually on the wallet. The wallet shows you the seed, which you then write down, and then you just hide that piece of paper, which is, some people just call it a paper wallet. What the cold storage wallet allows you to do is to view your balances, and you can get online securely and make quick transactions, but all of the information is flowing one way.
Okay,
Gotcha. That makes sense.
cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jason. This was incredibly educational. Really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything
Thanks for everyone for coming.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Make sure to join us next week for our next Tech Talk. And I hope everybody has a wonderful and safe weekend. Thank you so much.